Members in the chamber wishing to vote or change their vote? On this vote, the ayes are 95, the nays are 3. The motion is agreed to. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table.
You say 1 minute.
Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations, which the clerk will report.
Department of Justice. Kevin W. Tekow of Iowa to be United States Attorney for the Northern District. Andrew Mark Lugar of Minnesota to be United States Attorney. Robert L. Hobbs of Texas to be United States Marshal for the Eastern District. Gary Blankenship of Texas to be United States Marshal for the Southern District. Amos Roja Jr. of Florida to be United States Marshal for the Southern District. Peter C. Tobin of Ohio to be United States Marshal for the Southern District. Anthony Gardner of New York to be Representative of the United States of America to the Eastern European Union. Robert A. Sherman of Massachusetts to be Ambassador.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
At the conclusion of the vote, may I ask unanimous consent that the Senator from Minnesota be recognized for up to a minute, the Senator from Georgia for up to 7 minutes, the Senior Senator from Rhode Island for up to 2 minutes, and then I be recognized thereafter, subject to the Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I yield back all the time on these nominations.
Without objection, the Majority Leader.
Yield back all the time.
The question is on the Tekow nomination.
The question is now on the Tekow nomination. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. The Senator from Minnesota is now recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise today in support of Andrew Lugar. I thank my colleagues for the work that they've done to make sure that Minnesota has a U.S. attorney in place. I want to particularly thank Leader Reed and Senator McConnell, the two leaders, for their work on this, as well as Senator Franken. The two of us put together a nonpartisan recommendation coming from a committee, and we're very glad the President took that recommendation and recommended Andy Lugar with his vast criminal prosecution experience as well as civil experience. I also want to thank Senator Grassley for his work on this, as well as Senator Corker. Minnesota has gone really 2.5 years without a full-time U.S. attorney, as our U.S. attorney was doing the job as ATF director at the same time, and the over 100 people that work at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota truly deserve a leader, and I thank my colleagues for their support.
The question occurs now on the Lugar nomination. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. The question occurs on the Hobbs nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. The question occurs on the Blankenship nomination. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. The question occurs now on the Rojas nomination. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. The question now occurs on the Tobin nomination. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the President will now be notified of the Senate's action. The motions to reconsider are considered made and laid on the table, and the Senate will resume legislative session.
I ask consent that S.
Majority Leader.
S. 1963 be returned to the calendar.
executive session.
Yeah, under the previous order.
Under the previous order,
Two nominations remain to be disposed of.
2 nominations remain to be disposed of.
Question,
So are we in executive session?
Senate will resume executive.
The Senate will resume executive session.
Under the previous order, the question occurs on the Gardner.
Under the previous order, the question now occurs on the Gardner nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
Under the previous order, the question occurs on the Sherman nomination.
Under the previous order, the question is now on the Sherman nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
With the previous nominations,
As with the previous nominations, the motion reconsidered are considered made and laid on the table.
and the President will be
The President will be immediately notified.
and the Senate
The Senate now resumes legislative session. The Majority
President.
Leader.
Thank you. I ask consent that S 1963 be returned to the calendar.
Without objection.
I move to proceed to calendar number 301, S 1982.
The clerk will report the motion to proceed.
Calendar number 301, S 1982, a bill to improve the provision of medical services and benefits to veterans and for other purposes.
Yield the floor, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, I rise for 2 specific points which I would like to ask to be divided in the record as they appear, and I will note that place.
Without objection.
First of all, Mr. President, as we leave Washington for about 10 days, I want to leave some suggestions in President Obama's suggestion box. There's been a lot of commentary about income inequality, needing to raise the minimum wage, needing to create more jobs, and the President talking about doing these with a stroke of a pen from his office because of an uncooperative legislative branch. I'd like to make 4 suggestions on things the President himself could do to immediately initiate job creation, opportunity, and a more robust economy for the United States of America. First, Trade Promotion Authority. The President said in his remarks at the State of the Union that he was for Trade Promotion Authority. We need him to get with the Democratic majority in the Senate to bring TPA to the floor of the United States Senate. In a history lesson in the 1990s, a Republican Congress gave Democratic President Bill Clinton Trade Promotion Authority, or Fast Track. America's exports and imports grew exponentially, jobs were created, America became a robust trading partner around the world with countries all over the world. That has expired. We need to give it to President Obama. We have 3 pending opportunities: the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Act, and the African Growth and Opportunity Act, all of which are pending negotiation between now and 2015, all of which will generate jobs and trades and opportunity for the United States of America. Please, Mr. President, demand from the Senate that you get TPA, and you get it now. Secondly is Keystone. We've all heard a lot about Keystone, but I just want to reiterate, now that the State Department has for the 5th time signed off on the Keystone Pipeline, why are we denying America to have the oil and petroleum that it needs and instead of ceding ourselves to the nation of China? America has the opportunity to become the most independent energy country in the world. It is critical that the Keystone Pipeline be built to create jobs and to see that we continue to control the generation of petroleum and energy in our country and become a net seller of that rather than a gross importer of that, which we've been in many years in the past. The Keystone Pipeline makes sense to the unions, makes sense to business, makes sense to America, and Mr. President, I think America does a better job environmentally of treating petroleum and refining it than any country in the world, particularly China. It ought to come to America, and the President could do that with the stroke of a pen. Third, GSE reform. Our government-sponsored entities, or Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, continue to do business, but they languish from a lack of attention. We need to reform those 2 entities so we can have a robust housing market for middle America. If you've got enough money to pay cash for a house in America today, you can do that. If you're on the low end and want an FHA loan, you can get that. But if you're in the middle of America, if you're in the middle of America, if you're one of those Americans we all talk about wanting to help, there's not much mortgage money available because there's no government-sponsored entity to guarantee the paper, to create the capital to flow into mortgages in America. If you want to get the unemployment rate down from 6.4 to 5%, which all of us want, there's one way to do it. And that is bring back a robust housing market, which still does not exist in the United States today. And fourth, talked to Patty Murray and Tom Harkin. Tom Harkin, the chairman of our Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Patty Murray, the chairman of the subcommittee I serve on in terms of labor. And let's get the Workforce Investment Act, which for 6 years has languished in terms of continuation and renewal. And let's get it renewed, let's get it reauthorized, and let's get it done. The work is done. We are this close. We just need an impetus from the White House to tell the Congress to go ahead and get it done and send it. I appreciate what the President said he's going to do with Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is a tremendous Vice President and does a great job, but we don't need to recreate the wheel. Congress has done the work on WIA. It's time for us to pass it out, and it's time for the President to sign it. Now, I'd like at this point to divide my remarks and let them appear separately in the record if I can, because I want to pay tribute to a great Georgian, a personal friend of mine, and a great baseball player in the history of our country, Bobby Cox, number 6, former third baseman for the New York Yankees, third baseman for the Atlanta Braves, manager of Toronto's Blue Jays when they won a World Series, and for 14 consecutive seasons he took the Atlanta Braves to a playoff. 5 of those seasons he took them to the National League Championship. 1 of those seasons he took them to win the World Series against the Cleveland Indians. Bobby Cox was voted into the baseball's Hall of Fame and will be sworn in Cooperstown, New York, in June 27th of this year. Bobby Cox is an icon in baseball and a great human being. He set many, many records, like the following: 2,085 victories with the Atlanta Braves, best in history. Overall record of 2,413 wins, 1,930 losses. The Braves won more games with Cox, 1,725 in 19-season span, than they did with any other team in baseball won. 15 divisional crowns, 5 pennants, and he holds the record for the most ejections of any manager in the history of baseball. And the reason that's a positive story is this: Bobby Cox fought for his players. He knew how to motivate a crowd. He knew how to get on an umpire's back. He knew how to turn the team bench around. His 132nd ejection took place in November of 2007 in a game, in one of the playoff games, when he went out and argued a third call strike against his star player, Chipper Jones. 2 innings later, the Braves came back and rallied and won. In large measure, it was Bobby's fighting for his players that made the difference. But he also fights for Georgians. His work for Dreams of Recovery Foundation that Cindy Donald founded for those that are paraplegic and quadriplegics in Georgia has been a miracle. Bobby gives his time and effort all the time to help those less fortunate, and he continues to help the Atlanta Braves, who soon will be moving from downtown Atlanta to my home county of Cobb County in Marietta, Georgia. So I want to pay tribute and thanks to Bobby Cox for all he's given to our state, recognize him for the achievement of being sworn into the baseball's Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Best of luck, Bobby, and many more good years to come. Now I yield back the balance of my time.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, first I want to thank my colleague, Senator Whitehouse, for yielding 2 minutes. I will also ask unanimous consent that my statement be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are leaving here with major unfinished business. We have not extended unemployment benefits for 1.8 million Americans. They are getting to be increasingly desperate. They need this assistance as they continue to look for work in a very difficult economy. I think it's very interesting, if not ironic, that the pay-for mechanism that was used today to pay for the appropriate adjustment of the military retirees' COLA was the same pay-for mechanism that we had proposed to use to extend these benefits for up to several months, almost a year. And yet many of my colleagues on the other side rejected that, saying that was inappropriate. We have to come back. We will come back. We have to deal with unemployment insurance. We have to find a way, both sides, to come together and find a way to provide modest assistance to these Americans who are struggling to find work in a market where there are 3 applicants for every job. And with that, Mr. President, I would thank the senator from Rhode Island and yield the floor.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Senator Bozeman precede me in recognition on the floor for such time as you may consume.
Senator, without objection, Senator from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator, for allowing me this courtesy very, very much. I appreciate it. Mr. President, in last year's budget agreement, our retired service members were unjustly targeted to bear the burden of irresponsible spending. Balancing the budget on the backs of our service members is a reckless move that violates our responsibility we made to those who wear our nation's uniform, which is why I voted against the budget agreement. Numerous Arkansans have reached out to me urging Congress to correct these misguided cuts. I've been encouraging my colleagues to restore these cuts at the earliest opportunity in order to provide certainty for our military's retirees' financial future. And I, working with others in this body, have worked hard to bring this to a vote. Yesterday, the House took action. Now I'm pleased to be able to stand here and tell those Arkansans and all veterans that the Senate has followed suit and has corrected this injustice. However, we must continue working to fully repeal the section of the Bipartisan Budget Act that reduces retirement pay for those who enlist after January 1st, 2014. Any changes that Congress may consider to our military compensation system should be done in a thoughtful and responsible manner in the context of a broader compensation system. I supported this bill that was before the Senate today to restore the full cost of living adjustment for those enlisted prior to 2014, but will continue working fully to repeal this cut that singles out current military enlistments to bear the burden of wasteful Washington spending. We need to right this wrong so our veterans, service members, and their families have one less thing to worry about. However, this overwhelming vote today, this very bipartisan vote today was certainly a step in the right direction. And with that, I yield back.
Senator from Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. This marks the 58th consecutive week we've been in session that I've come to the floor to seek to wake up this Congress to the threat of climate change. Carbon pollution from the burning of fossil fuels is altering the climate. The consensus around this fact within the scientific community, and in fact the reality-based community at this point, is overwhelming. Since the Industrial Revolution, humans have dumped 2 trillion metric tons of carbon dioxide into the air and oceans, and counting. The EPA estimates that in 2011, the United States alone emitted more than 5.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide. We know that the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere is higher than it has been in the history of mankind. We know that when you put more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it warms up the planet. That's been understood science since Abraham Lincoln was president. We know that the ocean absorbs 90% of that excess heat and 30% of the carbon in the air. As water warms, it expands, and sea levels go up. That's called the law of thermal expansion. We know that when carbon dissolves in water, it increases the levels of carbonic acid in the water. That's not debatable. It's a law of chemistry. We know from simple measurements that seawater is acidifying at a rate we haven't seen at any time in the past 50 million years. And by the way, we're a species that has been Homo sapiens on the planet for a little over 200,000, so 50 million takes you back a ways. So when you put those things together, and then you look at things like 37 straight years with a global temperature above the 20th century average, sea level up 10 inches in Newport, Rhode Island, oyster spat killed off by acidic water in Washington state, shorter seasons for ski resort operators, and longer seasons for wildfire fighters, our climate, Mr. President, is changing. The scientific debate is long settled, and public awareness of the crisis is growing stronger and even across party lines. Outside these walls of Congress that have been barricaded by lies and special interest propaganda, Americans of all stripes, including more and more responsible Republican voices, acknowledge the threat of climate change and call for responsible solutions. Yet, Congress remains trapped behind a barricade of polluting special interest influence. Republicans in Congress refuse to get serious. It wasn't always this way. Conservation of this land's natural resources used to be a core value of the Republican Party. And protecting future generations' natural birthright from plundering by special interest industry was a cornerstone of Republican leadership. This month actually marks the anniversary of a milestone in that kind of American leadership. It was on February 1st, 1905, that President Theodore Roosevelt established the United States National Forest Service. Fed up with the cronyism and bureaucracy that defined the weak existing conservation programs, He dissolved the Bureau of Forestry within the Department of Agriculture and transferred management of the 63 million acres of national forests under the Department of the Interior to the new Forest Service. Roosevelt resented the malefactors of great wealth, as he called them, the timber and mining interests whose, and I quote, selfish and short-sighted greed seeks to exploit our natural resources in such fashion as to ruin them, and thereby to leave our children and our children's children heirs only to an exhausted and impoverished inheritance. Roosevelt not only knew how to say the right thing, he knew how to say it well. Pictured here is Teddy Roosevelt looking across the vast expanse of Mogollon Rim in Arizona, one of the many forests that were transferred to the newly created Forest Service. With the President is Gifford Pinchot, a prime advocate of the Forest Service and its first chief. Pinchot restructured and professionalized the management of the national forests. During Roosevelt's presidency, the federal forest system grew by nearly 130 million acres. In total, he extended protection to an additional 230 million acres of our nation's land. We have become great in a material sense because of the lavish use of our resources, Roosevelt said. And we have just reason to be proud of our growth. But the time has come to inquire seriously what will happen when our forests are gone, when the coal, the iron, the oil, and the gas are exhausted, when the soils shall have been still further impoverished and washed into the streams, polluting the rivers. Today, some of those long-cherished American forests, grasslands, and landscapes are under assault due to climate change. In July 2010, the Forest Service issued its national roadmap for responding to climate change. Specifically, the Forest Service report says most of the urgent forest and grassland management challenges of the past 20 years, such as wildfires, changing water regimes, and expanding forest insect infestations, have been driven in part by a changing climate. Future impacts, the report continues, are projected to be even more severe. Our bicameral task force on climate change, which I chair with Congressman Waxman, hosted a roundtable of firefighters and state and federal foresters. Here's what Dave Cleaves, the Forest Service's climate change advisor, told us. I'll quote him. So, what have we been seeing? The length of the fire season increasing by more than 60 days over the last 10 years. The annual area burned by wildfire increasing more than 4 times what it was in the 1970s. The portion of the area burned by large fires has gone up 2 to 7 times. So most of that increase in acreage has been because of the large fires and the extreme part of the distribution of fires. So we have a big issue on our hands. It's an ecological issue, it's an economic issue, it's a social issue, and dealing with it means we have to understand it better and understand some of the real challenges. Shown here is the devastation from the largest rim fire in the Sierra Nevada range recorded history. The healthy forest is shown 2 years prior to the fire on the left, while monitoring right before the fire showed a sudden decline here in the health of the forest, caused by the western pine beetle killing ponderosa pine and making the forest vulnerable to burning. That's a beetle that is killed off by cold weather, and so where it can infest forests is limited by cold weather and altitude, of course, because it gets colder at higher altitude. With climate change, the territory of the infestation has expanded, and you see this kind of a change from a healthy forest to this. And when it turns to this, it can burn. And on the right, we see the charred and unrecognizable landscape. Although we cannot definitively attribute any single fire to climate change, according to a 2012 comprehensive science synthesis report for the U.S. forest sector, increased temperature and drought can increase frequency and magnitude of fires and amplify insect and pathogen outbreaks that affect forest health. For example, Montana's deep freezes used to kill off the pine bark beetle. Today, that beetle kills millions of acres of trees across the American West. President Roosevelt issued a warning a century ago. One distinguishing characteristic of really civilized men is foresight, he said. We have to, as a nation, exercise foresight for this nation in the future. And if we do not exercise that foresight, dark will be the future. Have we heeded Roosevelt's warning? We can clearly foresee the devastation climate change will bring, yet many modern Republicans, particularly those in Congress, are aligning themselves with the polluters and the deniers to manufacture doubt about the science and to fight any limits on greenhouse gas emissions. Roosevelt, a Republican, had foresight to protect the natural resources we rely on, but his once great party has lost track of his ideals. Democrats and Republicans should be working with President Obama to implement his climate action plan to reduce carbon pollution. But when the Environment and Public Works Committee recently held an oversight hearing on the President's plan, what did we get from our Republican colleagues? Flat-out climate denial, the polluter party line. Theodore Roosevelt, the great Republican conservationist, stood up to polluting special interests. He was, in the name of the recent book, the wilderness warrior. Today, too many Republicans in Congress have joined polluting corporate special interests in their war on the wilderness. Perhaps they should listen to another Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt IV, the great-grandson of the 26th president, and still a Republican. He wants his fellow Republicans to return to the values of his great-grandfather. Quote, "It seems to be beyond the scope of many on the right to say, for instance, that species extinction as a result of unrestrained human activity is immoral and indefensible, that our refusal to seriously engage in a global effort to address climate change is unethical and imprudent." Mr. President, there are such clear warnings. The facts speak for themselves. The denial position has shown itself to be nonsense, a sham. Yet, in Congress, we sleepwalk on. Every day, more and more Americans realize the truth, and they increasingly want this Congress to wake up. They know that climate change is real. Well, it is time to wake up and to do the work necessary to combat climate change. It is time for us to heed the words of President Theodore Roosevelt. Here is your country. Cherish these natural wonders. Cherish the natural resources. Cherish the history and romance as a sacred heritage for your children and your children's children. Do not let selfish men or greedy interests skin your country of its beauty, its riches, or its romance. Let us wake up. I thank the presiding officer. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
The Senate this afternoon approved two bills, one that allows the Treasury Department to continue borrowing money, ensuring the federal government does not default on its more than $17 trillion debt for another year. That suspension of the debt ceiling will last through mid-March 2015. And the Senate also approved the House-passed bill to restore a cut to cost of living increases for certain military retirees. At one point, House GOP leadership had thought of tying the two together, but they now have passed them as separate bills. And both of these measures now go to President Obama for his signature. While these votes were happening this afternoon here in the Senate, President Obama signed an executive order increasing the minimum wage for a few 100,000 federal contractors, and then pressed the divided Congress to pass broader legislation that would apply to all workers. The Associated Press writes that the White House officially concedes that the executive order, which raises the hourly wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour, only applies to a small percentage of the more than 2 million federal contractors, but officials are hoping it generates momentum for President Obama's proposal on Capitol Hill. Roll Call has a story about the votes on the debt limit bill that happened in the Senate this afternoon. Senate Republican leaders Mitch McConnell of Kentucky and John Cornyn of Texas today voted to advance legislation that would increase the nation's borrowing capacity, but not before they spend 40 minutes of the open vote trying to get others to do it for them, likely out of fear of the conservative blowback that came almost immediately. Earlier this week, Senator Cruz of Texas demanded the 60-vote procedural move, which put McConnell and Cornyn in the uncomfortable position of having to find 5 Republicans to join Democrats in supporting the debt ceiling measure. By doing so, Cruz gave perfect fodder to Tea Party groups and candidates. Republican Matt Bevin is opposing Senator McConnell in a primary in Kentucky. Matt Bevin sending a tweet, "Once again, McConnell caves to the left and votes to break conservatives' filibuster on the debt ceiling." Mitch McConnell voting for the Democrats to vote yet another debt limit increase, that another tweet from Senate conservatives. The debt ceiling bill now goes to President Obama for his signature. Senate Armed Services Committee member John McCain came to the floor today to ask his colleagues to take action on the situation in Syria. We're going to watch that as we wait for a senator to speak.
Today to appeal to the conscience of my colleagues and my fellow citizens about the mass atrocities that the Assad regime is perpetrating in Syria. When the images and horrors of this conflict occasionally show up on our television screens, the impulse of many Americans is to change the channel, but we must not look away. We must not avert our eyes from the suffering of the Syrian people. For if we do, we ignore, we sacrifice that which is most precious in ourselves, our ability to empathize with the suffering of others, to share it, to acknowledge through our own sense of revulsion that what is happening in Syria today is a stain on our collective conscience of moral peoples everywhere. I appeal to my colleagues today not to look away from the images I will show you. And I want to warn all who are watching. These are graphic and disturbing pictures, but they're the real face of war and human suffering in Syria today. a war that our nation has the power to help end, but which we are failing to do. These images are drawn from a cache of more than 55,000 photographs that were taken between March 2011 and August 2013 by a Syrian military policeman whose job it was to document the horrors that the Assad regime committed against political prisoners in its jails. This individual eventually defected to the opposition along with his photographs, which were meticulously reviewed and verified by 3 renowned international war crimes prosecutors and a team of independent forensic experts. They compiled their findings in a report late last month that provides direct evidence that the Assad regime was responsible for the systematic abuse, torture, starvation, and killing of approximately 11,000 detainees in what amounts to war crimes and crimes against humanity. These are just a few of those pictures, and far from the most disturbing. I urge every member of Congress and the American people to read the full report, which can be found on both CNN.com and TheGuardian.com. Although only a handful of these gruesome images have been released publicly, the authors have provided their own startling commentary on what they reveal. David Crane, the first chief prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone and the man responsible for indicting former Liberian President Charles Taylor for crimes against humanity, stated that many of the photographs show groupings of bodies in a way that, quote, looked like a slaughterhouse. Crane characterized the Syrian government as, quote, callous industrial machine grinding its citizens that is guilty of, quote, industrial age mass killing. Professor Sir Jeffrey Nice, lead prosecutor in the case against former Yugoslav President Milosevic at The Hague, reported that the systematic way the bodies were cataloged and the effort given to obscure the true causes of death leads one to, quote, reasonably infer that this is a pattern of behavior for Assad's forces. But perhaps most chilling of all, Sir Desmond de Silva, who also served as a chief prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone, stated that the emaciated bodies revealed in these pictures are, quote, reminiscent of the pictures of those who were found still alive in the Nazi death camps after World War II. Yesterday, in a hearing of the Committee on Armed Services, I asked the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, whether these photographs, which clearly depict ghastly crimes against humanity, are authentic. The Director said that he has, quote, no reason to doubt their authenticity. The United Nations is now doing its own assessment of these images, and all of us should fully support that. It's important to have the broadest possible validation of these images, and I am confident the UN team will validate them. After all, does anyone seriously believe the Assad regime does not have the means, motive, and opportunity to murder 11,000 people in its prisons? Indeed, this kind of inhuman cruelty is a pattern of behavior within the Syrian government. According to a detailed UN report issued at the end of January, Assad's forces have systematically, as part of their doctrine, used children as human shields and threatened to kill the children of opposition members if they did not surrender. The UN also detailed the arrest, detention, torture, and sexual abuse of thousands of children by government forces. I will spare you the remaining details as they are unspeakable. But again, I urge you to read the entire report, which can be found on the United Nations website.
Mr. President,
the Majority Leader.
I would ask my friend if he would allow me to do a unanimous consent request to get us through the day. As usual, I very much appreciate his courtesy and his stunning delivery on this horrible situation going on in Syria. And I ask this record not appear interrupted so that his statement appears uninterrupted.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the lack of a receipt of the papers, if they have not arrived from the House, it be in order for the Majority Leader or his designee to move to concur in the House Amendment to S-25 at 1:30 today. If the message has arrived prior to 1:30, then the chair lay before the body the message from the House at 1:30 p.m., and I then be recognized to move to concur in the House Amendment to S-25. That there be up to 30 minutes of debate equally divided between the two leaders or the designees, that upon the use or yielding back of that time, the Senate proceed to vote on the motion to concur in the House Amendment, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table, with all the above occurring with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
So quickly, Mr. President, we're going to have up to 4 votes starting at 11:30, and then at 1:30 we'll come back and finish some other business today. And we hope to have a lot of votes today. And I am aware, as I mentioned last night, we're following the storm on an hourly basis, and we should know within the next few hours how accurate the reports of the snowstorm, good or bad, will be.
The gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. President, I also recommend that my colleagues read of the war crimes that Human Rights Watch has been documenting. They have reported, for example, on how Syrian authorities have deliberately used explosives and bulldozers to demolish thousands of residential buildings and, in some cases, entire neighborhoods for no military reason whatsoever, just as a form of collective punishment of Syrian civilians. Human Rights Watch researchers have also documented the toll of the Syrian government's airstrike campaign against Aleppo and Damascus, and in particular, the regime's use over the past few months of what has become known as, quote, barrel bombs. For my colleagues who are not aware of them, barrel bombs are oil drums or other large containers packed with explosives, fuel, shrapnel, glass, and all manner of crude lethal material. Their sole purpose is to maim, kill, and terrorize as many people as possible when they are indiscriminately dropped from Syrian government aircraft on schools and bakeries and mosques and other civilian areas. In one stark video of a barrel bomb's aftermath, a man stands in front of a child's body and cries out, "Oh God, we've had enough. Please help us." These are just some of the many reasons why our Director of National Intelligence referred to the Syria crisis yesterday as, quote, an apocalyptic disaster. And with more than 130,000 people dead, after more than 1/3 of the Syrian population has been driven from their homes, no truer words were ever spoken. But this apocalyptic disaster in Syria is no longer just a humanitarian tragedy for one country. It's a regional conflict and an emerging national security threat to us. The regime's war crimes are being aided and abetted by thousands of Hezbollah fighters and Iranian agents on the ground, as well as Russian weaponry that continues to flow into the Assad government, even as Russia works with us to remove the Assad regime's chemical weapons. A truly Orwellian situation. The conflict in Syria is devastating its neighbors. Lebanon is suffering from increased bombings and cross-border attacks by both the Syrian government and opposition fighters in response to Hezbollah's role in the fighting. Unofficial estimates suggest that half of Lebanon's population will soon be Syrian refugees. Similar estimates suggest that Syrian refugees now represent 15% of the population in Jordan, which is straining to manage the social instability this entails. Turkey has been destabilized. And perhaps most worrisome of all, the conflict in Syria is largely to blame for the resurgence of al-Qaeda in Iraq, which has grown into the larger and more lethal Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which now possesses a safe haven that spans large portions of both countries. Nowhere is this more threatening or more heartbreaking than in Fallujah, the Iraqi city where hundreds of U.S. troops were killed and wounded fighting to rid it of terrorists and extremists, but where the black flags of al-Qaeda now hang above the city. The sanctuary that al-Qaeda now enjoys, thanks to the crisis in Syria, increasingly poses a direct threat to U.S. national security and that of our closest allies and partners. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Mr. J. Johnson, said, quote, "Syria is now a matter of Homeland Security." The Director of National Intelligence has referred to the al-Qaeda sanctuary in Syria and Iraq as a, quote, "a new Fatah." The tribal areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan, where al-Qaeda planned the September 11th terrorist attacks. Indeed, Director Clapper has warned that al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists in Syria now aspire to attack the homeland. If the September 11th attacks should have taught us anything, it's that global terrorists who occupy ungoverned spaces and seek to plot and plan attacks against us can pose a direct threat to our national security. This was Afghanistan on September 10th, 2001, and that is what top officials in this administration are now warning us that Syria is becoming today. The conflict in theory in Syria is a threat to our national interests, but it's more than that. It is and should be an affront to our conscience. Images like these should not be just a source of heartbreak and sympathy. They should be a call to action. It was not too long ago, just a few months after the revolution in Syria began, that President Obama issued his presidential study directive on mass atrocities. In it he stated, and I quote, "Preventing mass atrocities and genocide is a core national security interest and a core moral responsibility of the United States." He went on to say, "Our security is affected when masses of civilians are slaughtered, refugees flow across borders, and murderers wreak havoc on regional stability and livelihoods." Last year, speaking at the U.S. Holocaust Museum, the President said, quote, "Too often the world has failed to prevent the killing of innocents on a massive scale, and we are haunted by the atrocities that we did not stop and the lives we did not save." And just last September, in his address to the UN General Assembly, President Obama said this, and I'd like to quote him at length. Quote, "The principle of sovereignty," he said, "is at the center of our international order. But sovereignty cannot be a shield for tyrants to commit wanton murder or an excuse for the international community to turn a blind eye. While we need to be modest in our belief that we can remedy every evil, while we need to be mindful that the world is full of unintended consequences, should we really accept the notion that the world is powerless in the face of a Rwanda or Srebrenica? If that's the world that people want to live in, they should say so and reckon with the cold logic of mass graves." That was our president. That was the President of the United States. And I agree with every word of what he said. But how are we to reconcile these stirring words with the reality of these images from Syria? How are to explain how the leader of the free world, who says that it is a moral obligation of the United States to do what we can to prevent the worst atrocities in our world, is not doing more to stop the atrocities that are occurring every single day in Syria? Where is that President Obama today? Where is the President Obama who has spoken so movingly of the moral responsibilities that great power confers? Where is President Obama, who has said he refuses to accept that brutal tyrants can slaughter their people with impunity, while the most powerful nation in the history of the world looks on and stands by? Where is the recognition that the, quote, cold logic of mass graves is right there, right in front of us, Syria, today? And yet our government is doing what we have sadly done too often in the past. We are averting our eyes. We try to comfort our guilty consciences by telling ourselves that we're not doing nothing, but it is a claim made in bad faith. For everyone concedes that nothing we are doing is equal to the horrors we face. We are telling ourselves that we are too tired or weary to get more involved, that Syria is not our problem. and that helping to resolve it is not our responsibility. We're telling ourselves that we have no good options, as if there are ever good options when it comes to foreign policy in the real world. We're telling ourselves that we might have been able to do something at one point, but that it's too late now, as if such words from the leader of the world's only global power will be any comfort to the Syrian mother who will lose her child tomorrow. We're telling ourselves what Neville Chamberlain once told himself about a different problem from hell in an earlier time. That is, and I quote Neville Chamberlain, "A quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing. Where is our outrage? Where is our shame?" It is true that our options to help end the conflict in Syria were never good, and they certainly are worse and fewer now. But no one should believe that we are without options even now, and no one should believe that doing something meaningful to help in Syria requires us to rerun the war in Iraq. That is an excuse for inaction. That is not a question of options or capabilities. It is a question of will. These images of the human disaster in Syria haunt me. And they should haunt all of my colleagues and all Americans. But what haunts me even more than the horror unfolding before our eyes in Syria is the thought that we will continue to do nothing meaningful about it, and how that deadens our national conscience, and how it calls into question the moral sources of our great power and the foundations of our global leadership, and how many years from now an American president will stand before the world and the people of Syria, as previous presidents have done after previous inaction in the face of mass atrocities in faraway lands. And that president will say what all of us know to be true right now, that we could have done more to stop the suffering of others. We could have used the power we possess, limited though it may be. We could have exercised the options at our disposal, imperfect though they may be, and we could have done something. It is to our everlasting embarrassment that we did not, and that future president will apologize for our current failure. Shame on us if we let history repeat itself that way.
Here's how the Associated Press is writing about the debt ceiling votes in the Senate this afternoon. Must-pass legislation to allow the government to borrow money to pay its bills has cleared Congress for President Obama's signature. The Senate approved the measure by a near party-line 55-43 vote. All the ayes in that vote came from Obama's Democratic allies. But the Associated Press continues saying that the vote to pass the measure was anticlimactic after a dramatic 67-31 tally held open for more than an hour, in which the measure cleared a filibuster hurdle. Wanted to let you know what's happening in our primetime schedule tonight on all the C-SPAN channels. At 8 Eastern on C-SPAN, President Obama signs an executive order raising the minimum wage for government contractors. Here on C-SPAN 2, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee meets about transportation infrastructure. And on C-SPAN 3, a hearing on extreme weather events. Here's a little bit more about that. The Wall Street Journal writes that as another fierce winter storm sweeps through the southeast and was set to engulf the nation's capital later in the week, the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs held a hearing to discuss how to better prepare the nation for extreme weather events. In his opening statement, the committee's chairman, Senator Tom Carper, said extreme weather has become the new norm, adding events like Superstorm Sandy, recent wildfires, dangerous tornadoes, and historic droughts may well just be the tip of the iceberg of what's to come. That from that hearing from the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, which you can see on C-SPAN 3 at 8 Eastern tonight. As we wait for a senator to speak, here's Congressman Luis Gutierrez talking about immigration on this morning's Washington Journal.
Welcome back to our table. Congressman Luis Gutierrez, Democrat of Illinois. Immigration is our topic. And the lead paragraph of USA Today's story online is that they say hope for immigration reform all but dead.
That's the 247th obituary on immigration in this Congress, and there'll probably be a few more. That's what the press likes to do.
You don't
to
believe
say
it?
something's dead instead of listening very carefully to what Speaker Boehner said. What he said was, it's hard. I was kind of like, when I heard him say, I said, welcome to my world. We know it's hard, but we welcome you to this debate and to getting it resolved. He said it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to get it done this year, but he didn't say it couldn't be done this year. And so, plus, let's face it, the politicians in Washington, D.C. don't really dictate when things do and don't get done, when they begin and when they end, better said that way. The community is alive and well, and the immigrant community is continuing to push forward. So it's not dead by a long shot.
And that's the headline on this piece in USA Today, is that immigration activists threaten GOP political payback. What's the plan? What's the strategy?
Well, it's quite, I mean, it isn't rocket science, really, Greta. It's, look, you take Romney. Romney got 60% of the white vote and lost. Why? Because, you know, he got 5% of the black vote, 20% of the Latino vote, 50% of the Asian vote. I mean, you can't have those kinds of numbers because among women voters. So if the Republican Party is going to continue to be a party that says no to large growing sectors of the electoral population in the United States, you know, they're going to be a party of provinces and counties and a few states, but they'll never be a national party again. Someone wrote, they did an analysis, and they said, let's look at the last 6 elections, at the states that Democrats have won in the last 6 elections, and they came up with 243 electoral votes. And what's trending nationally is that the trend will be for more states to look like those 243. Look, it only takes 270 to win the presidency, and Democrats seem to start with 90% of the electoral votes they need from the very beginning.
So, and you predicted yesterday, I think it was, a blowout in for Democrats in 2016 if immigration reform is not passed.
If you're up that night, you're going home, you get to go to bed early, because you're going to know who the next president of the United States is in November of 2016. It's going to be early. It's going to be a blowout, and it's going to be very early. And those are just the trends of the past. I remember this last election cycle, they tried to play out the drama a little more, and it was 10 o'clock and it was over. It's going to be even earlier the next election cycle.
Well, like you said at the top, House Speaker John Boehner said it's hard. He didn't say it wouldn't happen. What did you make of the principles that the Republican Party put forth after they had their retreat last week?
Look, I think I want to first say that not only did I respond positively, but Leader Pelosi, the President of the United States, I mean, across the board, there was a sense of, you know, you're headed in the right direction. This is definitely a set of principles that we can begin to work from, and we were very pleased that they were finally moving forward with their principle. I know how hard it's going to be. I mean, it took me a decade to get Democrats on board with comprehensive immigration reform, and so I know it's going to be difficult for them. But look, I still believe we can get it done this year, because it's what's necessary for the country.
Would you agree to what Chuck Schumer put forward, Democrat from New York? The paper's saying that he called House Speaker John Boehner's bluff on immigration, saying they want to do immigration reform, but they don't trust the president to enforce the law, particularly the enforcement part. So there's a simple solution, he said on Meet the Press. Let's enact the law this year, but simply not let it actually start until 2017, after President Obama's term is over.
That's really what was going to happen anyways. Why? Because if the president were to sign the bill tomorrow, it would take over 2 years between the signing of the bill and the moment any benefit, that is, someone can go to a government office and apply for a benefit. So I think it's a good deal. because it's what was going to happen anyways. I mean, it takes at least 2 years, maybe a little more.
What do you make of this tweet from Senator Kelly Ayotte, Republican of New Hampshire, saying, I supported the Senate immigration bill. Wasn't perfect, but the status quo is unacceptable. I hope the House can find a way forward.
Absolutely. And I think there are Republican men and women who want to get comprehensive immigration reform for security reasons, for economic reasons, and also for political reasons. I mean, they want to take this off the table. So I say, look, if you believe in social justice, immigration reform is good. If you believe in, I mean, just think of untapping 11 million people and their entrepreneurial spirit. We know what the Congressional Budget Office says about the Senate bill. It says it actually produces a surplus of nearly $100 billion in the first 10 years and $1 trillion after 20 years. I think I want $1 trillion in our pocket in the U.S. Treasury because what we're doing is we're bringing people into our system and we're saying you're going to be accountable, you're going to pay all your taxes, and we're going to know where you are. And because you feel secure and because you feel safe, because now you have a legal status in the United States, you're going to just explode in terms of your economic activity, which is good for all of us.
All right, let's get to phone calls.
Sure.
John is waiting in Island Lake, Illinois, Republican caller. Hi, John.
Hello.
Go ahead, John. You're on the air with the congressman.
Yes, we're a nation of laws, and I like Mexican people. They're hardworking people, and I like their food. But we're a nation of laws. These people have come in here illegally. If I was to break the law, I go to jail. It boils down to money with these politicians, and we're a nation of laws. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I wanna make them right with the law. We want to put them at the end of the line, but we want to make sure that we know where they're at. Look, they're here, and they're not going anywhere. I think we have to, first of all, realize that 2/3 of them have been here more than a decade. Most of them live with children, wife, in a family setting. They're already here. They do lots of jobs in America that really nobody else wants to do. And why do I say that? I say that because I've been to orchard fields, I've been to citrus fields, I've been where they pick garlic, lettuce, tomatoes, I've been where they pick the grapes from the fine Chardonnay that we drink from California. Look, we're going to have people in this country work and pick the produce, and it's going to be picked with foreign hands here in the United States, or it's going to be picked in foreign countries with foreign hands. Let's make the decision. Meatpacking plants, lots of places across this country in which they do critical, essential work. And all I want to do is make them right with the law. Many people think, well, they didn't use the right way. Well, there is no right way, because there is no way for our American economy to supply the kind of needs in certain sectors the right way, because the right way doesn't exist. They shut the right way down back in the 1990s. We need clear paths in the future so that people can come to America using the right path.
Peggy's next. Lafayette, Louisiana, independent caller. Hi, Peggy.
Hey there.
You are on the air with Congressman Gutierrez. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to say that I have a wonderful Hispanic son-in-law that we think the world of. And here's his particular problem. He came in from El Salvador 15 years ago, legally, under a system called temporary protective status. And the problem is, apparently that status has to be renewed from time to time. And in the immigration talks, I have not heard that talked about, but it's been a nightmare. We even have had to hire an attorney to try and sort this out. So I wanted to be sure that the people under TPS will not be forgotten about in this reform.
Okay.
No, they won't be forgotten about. And let me just say that if you're down in Chicago way, you can just visit our congressional office instead of visiting an attorney, so that we can explain to you about temporary protective status. There should be no reason you need an attorney. It's been reinstated time and time again, and I see no reason why the Barack Obama administration is going to say to Salvadorians and other Central Americans and Haitians, which are receiving temporary protected status because of the crisis in their country, that he's going to somehow end that program. And it is an important part of, and I'm happy she brings it up because a lot of people think, well, you know, it's just about those illegals out there and whether they're going to be citizens of the United States. No, there are a lot of people legally in this country in limbo, as her friend is, that we need to sort out.
How does it work, this protective status?
Well, let me give you an example. There was an incredibly ugly, vicious earthquake in Haiti. There were Haitians here in the United States. So we made a decision that we're not going to return people to Haiti under those conditions. And that's called temporary protective status. What happened in El Salvador was a similar crisis. And the difficulty also with the system is how do you then integrate them when it's temporary? And so we want to find a permanent solution.
Is that a pathway to citizenship if you get this protective status?
No, it isn't. It's a temporary status and has to be continuously renewed by the executive branch of government, and they can end it at any time.
Stella on Twitter says this: tell us how you will verify taxes owed. How do you do background checks from all over the world? How do you collect money from people?
Well, number one, they're here, so we don't have to go all over the world. As I said, 2/3 of the undocumented have been here for more than 10 years. So we know. They will, I assure you, they will show up with documentation of where they're working. But what I want to do is, because I think a lot of people think of immigration reform and they forget, so I'm happy she's bringing this issue up. Here's the kind of system that we want. We want an employment verification system. What does that mean? It means before you, Greta, or I can get a job in the United States or anyone else, it has to be verified that they're legally in the country, and that verification has to happen through the federal government. And if you're an employer that hires someone without going through that vetting system, we're going to lock you up and put you in jail, just like if you didn't pay your taxes or you violated any other law of the land. And we have to make sure that everybody goes through that verification system. We can do that in 5 to 7 years. That is to say, it's going to make us much more secure. I mean, a lot of people say, well, you know, there's, I don't want a new, you got the largest guest worker program that exists in the world, 11 million people working in the United States of America. What I want to do is I want to put them on the books. They're already paying taxes. So they pay sales tax, they pay a gasoline tax, they pay lots of taxes. I'm not quite sure all of those taxes are making it back to the government. I want to put them on the books. That's why when the Congressional Budget Office says, well, if you legalize 11 million people, what happens to our Treasury? Actually, it's to the good. $100 billion in the first 10 years, $1 trillion after 20.
We're talking with Congressman Luis Gutierrez, represents the 4th District of Illinois, Chicago area, is part of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, been a leader on pushing for immigration reform in his 11th term, elected with 83% of the vote the last time around, first elected in 1992. So if you have questions, comments about immigration, you can dial in. We'll go to Irvin next in Timberlake, North Carolina, Republican caller.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, hey, listen, I want to tell the whole country that there's 25 jobs in Durham, North Carolina, and at Burger King. It's all Mexican nationals that aren't supposed to be here. And I just thought, you know.
And Urban, how do you know that?
Because they don't speak English.
Well, why is that evidence that they're not here legally?
Well, if they were here legally, they would probably know how to speak English.
Okay, Congressman?
Well, it's not, lots of students come from all over the world. It's always interesting that this is the 3rd time callers referred to Mexicans. I just want to tell America, so that we're clear, 40% of the undocumented, those that are here illegally in the United States, came here legally to the United States on a visa, a student visa. They came here on a tourist visa. They came here on an employment visa. So this constant reference to one group of people just is not a reflection of the reality. I know that that's been the talk and the spin, but really, when we talk of the 11 million, we're talking about millions of people from Poland and Ireland and the Philippines and from all parts of the world. And we want to fix our broken immigration system. Look, I don't know about the Burger King. Here's what I can tell you. If you fix the system and you put an employment verification system into it, then the guy that opens up the Burger King must go on. I'm sure that owner of that Burger King, I'm pretty sure, he checked their Social Security cards, right? But come on, Greta, let's be real. My granddad, back in the 1930s, I could just imagine when he got in the mail his Social Security card, right? And he had a little perforation, and he took it out, and I don't know how he laminated it because there wasn't that kind of lamination back then. And then my dad got one, right? Same thing in the mail, a little flimsy Social Security card. I got one. My children got one. My grandson got one. Come on, we can do a lot better after 70 years, almost 80, 90 years of having Social Security cards. We can do a lot better. We have more information on your debit card about who you are or any other credit card about who you are than on that Social Security card. We need to do better than a Social Security card. If we want to have a nation in which we control who works here and who doesn't work here, and we want a legal immigration system.
So what do you use if you don't use
Oh, I think you can use metrics. There are metrics. You can look, there's a little, you know, it's always funny because you and I both know that if you swipe the card and the credit card company says, well, you know, Luis lives in Chicago and he just swiped it in San Francisco. And all of a sudden, the merchant tells you, well, you got to call your company. Why can't we have that kind of verification system on when you're going to work? I mean, they verify if you're not in the right place geographically, they'll stop your credit card. Shouldn't we be able to know who's working in America and have a verification system?
Shorty on Twitter says, Congressman, immigration would be easier to take if it wasn't part of the engineered plan of government to lower U.S. wages for corporate greed.
Well, let me just say this. When you look at vast sectors of our economy, immigrants play a very key, vital role. And there are other sectors of our economy which aren't meatpacking plants, which aren't working in agriculture. Let's take the high-tech industry. If we want to be competitive as a nation, we're going to need people in the sciences and mathematics to come to America for jobs that exist in America, for which, unfortunately, there are no qualified, talented Americans to take. Let me give you my take first on jobs, so that we're absolutely clear about this. I believe that any job created in America should first go to an American if the American exists with the qualifications to fulfill. I believe that fundamentally. And then, after we have satisfied the needs of those born in this country, you know, then we have opportunities for employment for others to come here. We always have. That's been the cycle of immigrants coming to America and fulfilling. I know a lot of people say, well, you know, all those 11 million, they're here taking jobs from other people. Well, you know, I don't know that there's a long line, even at Burger King, to take those jobs. I do find, as I travel throughout the country, I do find lots of immigrants fulfilling very low wage. And somebody said to me the other day, well, we just have to pay people more to pick the lettuce and tomato. I said, really? The Republican Party won't increase the minimum wage, but they're going to increase the wages of which we pay people to pick lettuce and tomato and pick our crops. That's not going to happen. We should have an economy in which, you know, the capitalism is at work. So all I'm saying is, I didn't send my 2 daughters to college, and I'm sure your viewers didn't send their kids to college so they can go and pick something. Somebody's going to have to do it. But yet, at the same time, that is very critical work. It's backbreaking, it's dirty, filthy work. Take it from me. I've been out there to watch them work out in the fields across America. It's hard work. And what we should be saying is, you know what? Those people are doing hard work, and they're keeping our economy strong, and they're keeping us safe. I just want to reiterate, you're going to get your food picked here in the United States by foreign hands, or you're going to get it picked by foreign hands in foreign countries. You decide where your security lies.
Keith, in Evansville, Indiana, Democratic caller.
Yes. Again, this goes back to, like, you're trying to get the immigration reform done. You're trying to get some unemployment benefits restored. the jobs are all going overseas. So you need to back up, you know, put everything to the side and let's get the jobs going. So if you want these immigrants to have jobs, there's no jobs. So why are you trying to work on this? That's just a stall tactic. And, you know, you need to concentrate on one item.
And
but you're never going to get nothing done. You're not getting nowhere. You're slipping in the mud.
Okay. All right, Keith.
Look, I think it's critical and essential that we have a modern 21st century immigration system in the United States. We have 11 million people working in the shadows. We should register them with the government, have them pay their taxes, including back taxes. We should register them with the government. They should pay fines. They should learn English. They should learn about our way of government, and we should incorporate them fully. I believe they should be given a pathway to citizenship, A, because it's the right thing to do, and B, because I wanted to fulfill every last responsibility and obligation to this country that I have as a citizen. I don't want somebody saying, maybe I don't have to do everything everyone else has to do, and I don't have the same commitment to America that everybody else has. I want everybody to have the same commitment to this country.
Are you able to go to the Democratic retreat?
I'm not going to the Democratic retreat. I am going to go back to my congressional district immediately after this and before the snow hits Washington, D.C., so I can get back to Chicago. I have things to do back in the district, and I'm going to go get those done.
What do you think the strategy should be for House Democrats going forward to push on immigration reform?
Well, look, it took a while, Greta. It wasn't like, back in 2007 and 8, 2009 and 10, Democrats were in charge of the House of Representatives. But we never proposed comprehensive immigration reform because we didn't have the votes, even though we were 240, 250 strong. But we worked on that. And now there's a group of people, 98% of the Democrats today in the House of Representatives, right, would support the bill as it is put forward in the Senate proposal. But I want to take a moment to talk just a moment about the Senate proposal, because there's this thing that, it takes 13 years from the moment you join the legalization process. That is, if you're undocumented
in the Senate,
it takes 13 years before you have the ability, not the guarantee, the opportunity to apply for American citizenship. So it's a long road, and you have to pay fines, you have to learn English, you can't be unemployed, you better get right with the law. I mean, it's a very straight and stringent road there. So, as well it should be. And the immigrants are ready to take that on. And plus, you know what? I got to tell you, the gentleman talked about jobs. You know what? If you eliminated the 11 million people from the United States of America, they would stop going to stores. I've been to towns where they've been really harsh and punishing on immigrants. And you know what I find? I find ghost towns. You find ghost towns. All you have to do is go out to Postville, Iowa. I wish you and I would go to Postville, Iowa. They did a big raid there. It's a ghost town now. Because why? All of the immigrants were buying clothes at the clothing store, buying food at the grocery store, filling up the empty apartments, thereby creating more economic. Look, 75% of all economic activity is what? When people go buy something. But now, let's just go back to Mexico 1 second. Mexico is the second largest trading partner of the United States. Second. Now, why is that important to jobs? Because that means they're buying our goods, Greta. And because they're buying our goods, they create millions of jobs in the United States for those of us that live here. So let's begin to look at how jobs are created and not try to build a moat around ourselves, because if we do that, I tell you, we won't have economic activity that is necessary to keep us the strong nation that we are.
You have been working in the House with a group of Republicans and Democrats on pushing for immigration reform, similar to the Gang of Eight in the Senate. Raul Labrador, Congressman, was part of your group that got together. Here's a headline on Fox News Latino that says, Congressman Labrador warns, if the Speaker takes up immigration, he should be out of a job.
Yeah, I think that's regrettable because, A, Raul's a very intelligent and very knowledgeable about immigration policy. And suffice to say, I spent 5 months with him drafting the legislation. So it just seems a little ironic that someone I spent 5 months drafting the legislation would now say, don't do anything or you shouldn't have the job. I mean, he was helping. So I hope Raul comes back to the table because I think he can be an important part of not saying no. We've got lots of people here in Washington D.C. to say no. Democrats propose something, Republicans say no. You know, Republicans propose something, Democrats say no. I mean, let's try to learn how to say yes in Washington, D.C.
We'll go to Kathy next. She's in Montgomery, Texas, Republican caller. Hi, Kathy.
Yes, good morning. How are you? Okay, so I live in Texas, and we have a lot of Mexicans. I think they are hardworking, honestly, very, very kind people. The problem is we live in a country of laws, and I don't even say that's a problem because we must get a handle on this by shutting down the border first. And I mean, there's just so many people here illegally. It's not even just Mexicans. It's so many, and it has nothing to do with their nationalities. I mean, we came from Europe. Our families came from Sicily. We did it the legal way. We worked hard. We had the American dream. But I feel Democrats are giving this country away. I mean, it really is sad that they're turning people against each other by saying, oh, Republicans don't like Mexicans or Republicans don't want to help these people. We do, but we have to do it in a legal way, and I think that they're very kind, and everybody needs a chance. We had the chance here, and our kids are all doing excellently, but follow the law. Thank you.
I think that that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make them right with the law. At the same time, our system is broken. We want to fix it. Now, we can say that we can go about the business of trying to deport 11 million people. Well, number one, that's not a realistic alternative. You're not going to deport 11 million people. Look, Barack Obama has deported more people than any other president in the history of the United States. So look, even with enforcement Barack Obama, 2 million people have been deported. Devastating effect on our community. But what we must understand is there's still millions and millions of, even if you kept this up at this pace, you're not going to deport yourself out of the problem. So my suggestion is to have a realistic suggestion. Look, nobody in the Congress, not the nastiest, ugliest xenophobe in the House of Representatives of the Senate, has ever proposed a system and say, here's the money, now go out there, right? Can you imagine trying to round up 11 million people? There's 5 million American citizen children. Those 11 million people are married to American citizens in many cases. I mean, they have relationships with those of us that are here, not only from Mexico, but from Poland and Ireland and the Philippines and all parts of the world that live here. They work here. Most of them have been here more than 10 years. The system is broken. I want to fix the system in a realistic manner that helps drive our economy.
Should the president stop this deportation policy?
I think the president should continue to expand on his executive authority to stop the deportations of certain groups of immigrants in this country. Yes, I think there are American citizen children, millions of them, millions of American citizen children who, through no fault of their own, have parents that are undocumented in this country who are working. Now, if you're a gangbanger, a drug dealer, a criminal, I said put you in the front of the line and out of this country. First, we're going to make sure you punish you right here in the United States, but then we want you out. Look, there are two types of people that come here. There are foreigners that come here, and there are immigrants that come here. And I make a distinction between the two. The immigrants come here to do valuable work, valuable, essential, critical work. I wish for just one moment I could show the lady in Texas and the other person out in Alabama what the landscape would look like in America if the 11 million were just to disappear. Who would be working in the fields in Georgia, in Alabama, in Mississippi, in the south of this nation? Not to speak about who would be working in those fields in California. Look, you can go across this country, and you can say what you want, but nobody wants to do the dirty, back-breaking, filthy work of working in agriculture in America. And Americans are sending their kids more to college, more and more each day, graduating from high school and college. That's a good thing. And nobody sends their kids so that in the end, somebody could say, well, we're going to give you an artificial salary of $15 an hour. Why don't you go work those fields? Ain't going to happen. We know it's not going to happen. It is critical. And on the high-tech industry, we need people with math skills, with science skills. We need to bring them from across the world so America can continue to be the kind of competitive nation it's always been.
Here is a tweet from a viewer. Would you still support new immigration laws if you found out they would all vote GOP?
Yeah, I don't care. I have worked with the Republican Party. Greta, you know better than most that every time I have proposed immigration legislation, I did it with John McCain and with Kennedy back in 2003 and 2004. I have always been bipartisan in moving forward. I sat down with a group of 8. I believe that this should be an American solution. I think part of the problem here is, now I will say this, George Bush was the last Republican president elected. He got 43% of the Latino vote in that election. He won. But if you're going to continue to criminalize all of us, because when you pass a law in Arizona like SB 1070, the Show Me Your Paper law, I'm going to just tell you something, Greta. I'm going to tell you right here on this program. They're not asking you for your papers, Greta, when they pull you over. They're going to ask me, and I was born in this country. And I resent any law that stereotypes me and that promotes that kind of stereotype. I think it's wrong and it's un-American, and we shouldn't have those kind of laws in this country.
We talked about this a little bit at the top, but you predicted that if Congress doesn't do anything about immigration reform, that Democrats will win in 2016.
Oh, it is clear to me that the demographics are such that that's going to happen.
What about Chris Christie, if he becomes the nominee for the Republican Party? Because, just let me point out that when he won re-election this past year in 2013, he carried 51% of the Latino vote.
That's in New Jersey. That's in that election. That is not a presidential election. That's a local election. The other thing is that Chris Christie also said he would support the DREAM Act locally in New Jersey. And he was being very kind, and he was doing outreach work to the Latino community. So I guess my answer is twofold. Number one, he tried to show a new face of the Republican Party. George Bush got Latino votes too, because he showed a different face to the immigrant community in this country. So my point is, Republicans can do well, or they can just be a party. Look, you want the Republican Party to be a national party? You want it to gain the presidency of the United States? Guess what? Got to change your politics on immigration, because if you don't, you will always be a party of provinces, counties, and localities. If that's what you want, local government in some parts of the United States, and never be a player again on the national scene, just continue with your anti-immigrant rhetoric. You will not be able to reach out to the sufficient number of communities in America to win a national election.
We'll go to Kathy next in Pompano Beach, Florida, a Democratic caller. Hi, Kathy.
Good morning.
Morning.
How's everybody? Good
Doing
morning.
well.
Yes, I just want to say America is the land of laws, and it really bothers me because if anything we do, we go to jail. It doesn't matter, trespassing, whatever, you go to jail. And how can you not, if these people broke the law, how can they not go to jail? That's a slap in the face for the ones that go to jail for anything, walking, trespassing, anything. And they don't go to jail for breaking the law. Are you kidding me? If they don't go to jail, I'm telling you, they need to go to jail.
Okay, Kathy, Congressman?
Yes, sure. Number one, it's a civil offense to work in the United States undocumented. It's a misdemeanor. I don't think we're going to fill our jails with people that commit civil offenses and misdemeanors, number one. Now, those that engage in criminal activity should have the full force of the law brought against them. We want to get that done. Again, look, no one has ever proposed preparing the kind of system with the requisite resources necessary for today. Let's go out and have the federal government, throughout all of its agencies, using all of its police powers, to go up and round up 11 million people. I just want you to close your eyes and think about that. Well, nobody's ever proposed that because they know that's not realistic. I have a realistic solution to the problem, and I have a bipartisan solution to the problem. Republicans and Democrats. Let's look at the issue of immigration. The AFL-CIO, the labor movement, got together with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I mean, those two institutions fight in Washington, D.C. every day, spending tens of millions of dollars lobbying against each other. They're together. The Farm Workers Union, created by Cesar Chavez, the Farm Workers, United Farm Workers Union, got together with the largest growers, and they agreed on how they would treat the current agricultural worker and future agricultural workers. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal couldn't be different in their editorial opinion. They're both for and I, who have seen such division among religious leaders, I find Presbyterians and Lutherans and evangelicals and very conservative Protestants, together with Catholics and others, with Muslims and Jews, all together. So it just seems to me that the only place people can't find common ground, obviously in the rest of America we can find common ground, in every other sphere, right, of society and influence in America we can find common ground, except in the House of Representatives. I refuse to believe we can't find that common ground. And the fact that the Republicans put forward their principles tells me there's common ground. Look, Boehner just didn't like wake up one day and write those and scribble them down on a piece of paper and take them. Those were thoughtful, well thought out principles that they put in black and white. And he must have believed that there was certain currency. There must have been leadership in the Republican Party behind that. Somebody must have said, we need to do that. The first battle is to say this is something we want to move forward. They knew it was going to be difficult, a little more difficult than they believed. But you have a very extreme right wing of the Republican Party that's telling them no, no, no. Well, you know what? Follow that small demographic right wing in your Republican Party, and you will always be a party of localities.
Let's go to Cody next. In Aberdeen, Washington, independent caller. You're on the air with Congressman Gutierrez, a Democrat of Illinois. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my call this morning. I'd just like to say that I support legal immigration. I'm not a racist in any way. Our country was founded on immigration, so I fully believe in the legal process of immigration. In my town, in Aberdeen, we experienced a huge loss of jobs after the logging industry collapsed, and now with the mass influx of immigrants from all over Central and South America, I'm not just going to label them as Mexicans or Colombians or whatever. You know, they're Latinos. And it seems to me like they tend to do a lot of shopping at their own stores, that they're not going to go and shop at a regular American store, that they're going to go and buy foods that came from their own country instead of buying foods that come from our country.
And is that a concern?
It is a concern of mine. Yeah, that is one concern. Yeah, because I feel that they're coming, people come here, immigrate to our country, and then spend money that they're making in our country on stuff that's coming from their own country.
Okay. Congressman?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just at a loss here. I like Chinese food. Does that make me un-American to go to a local Chinese restaurant or a Thai restaurant or a Greek restaurant? I mean, that's part of America. I mean, eating different foods from different countries. I don't know. If I only eat cheeseburgers and hot dogs, that makes me 100% American, and buying food and products from other places. Look, here's the thing. If you're upset that the immigrants are eating ethnic food, then you should go to the large Dominick's, Jewels, and the Safeways, and all these large American corporations that have their ethnic aisles, okay? Ethnic aisles. Just go to your local grocery store. So let's not kid ourselves. Target does it. Every major American corporation. You know what they do? And he says, oh, they don't buy, right? That's nothing but a pack of lies. Because let me tell you something. Turn on Spanish and turn on ethnic TV and Polish, and you know what you got? Ford and GM and every major corporation in the language of those people selling their products. And back at the plant, there are Americans speaking English, producing those cars and producing those goods. So, you know, commerce, I mean, if I want to communicate and I want to sell something, then it's okay. Unless it's a group of people going over there and eating food that they're used to from their country. The fact is that I'm happy that Italians and Greeks and Chinese kept their culinary delicious menus. because I continue to enjoy them, and I think that's part of the diversity of America.
The caller started out by saying, you know, I'm for immigration reform, followed by, I'm not a racist.
But I'm against it. Before he was against it.
He said also, though, I'm not a racist. Or do you think that people who are not for immigration reform are racist?
No, I've never said that. I have heard racist comments by people who are against immigration reform. Look, here's the fact. Every survey that's been done, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or CNN, you name, says that 2/3 of the American people are for legalizing the 11 million and giving them a pathway to citizenship. That's not a dispute anymore. The vast majority of American people believe that. And they're white, and they're black, and they're Hispanic, and they're of every color. So I think when you go out to America and speak to the American people, they want to fix our broken immigration system. I'm telling you, it's only in the House of Representatives where there is a problem. And part of that problem is, I've seen you've addressed this issue before on this program. Part of it is that we come from these congressional districts in which all we're thinking about is the very next election. So there'll be like immigrants and Asians and Latinos and people, Eastern Europeans from Poland and Ireland here, but they won't be in these other districts, so people say, well, I'll just disregard that. So people don't think of themselves as being an American representative in the U.S. Congress. They think of themselves as being the representative of that congressional district and reflecting only that congressional district and not the broader views of the American people. And they want to get elected. And then you have these primaries, Republican primaries, in which the influence of very conservative sectors of the Republican Party just outweighs the rest of the Republican Party. And I think that is, unfortunately, what's pushing a lot of things.
Congressman, we have to let you go because I know you need to catch a flight before this storm comes to Washington
telling you,
area.
Greta, it's coming. I'm going to see if you show up to work tomorrow.
Oh, I'll be here.
I'm going to tune in on C-SPAN.
Congressman Gutierrez represents the 4th District of Illinois. Thank you, sir, for your time.
You're welcome.